It was revealed just a few days ago that Italy and Germany wanted $240 billion of their US held gold to be returned back to their respective central banks. What do you think the reason for this might have been?
Well, it's really very, very simple. And that is there is growing suspicion about the security of their gold held at the New York Fed. You may recall that about 10 years ago, I think it was 2014, that Germany requested the return of 300 tons from the New York Fed. And the New York Fed's initial response was that this was going to take 7 years to deliver. Now, this was extremely suspicious at the time. 300 tons is just, half a dozen flights across the Atlantic. So if the gold is there, it was the Bundesbank's property, why not return it? And indeed, there are still over 1,000 tons sitting at the New York Fed. Why not return that? Presumably, the 300-ton figure was arrived at after intensive discussions between the New York Fed and the Bundesbank, with the New York Fed effectively saying to the Bundesbank, we can't return this gold to you. But the Bundesbank being in the position where it had requested the return of gold. I mean, there have been moves within the Bundestag to get this going. So the Bundesbank was under some pressure. So the central banks, in effect, the friendly central banks, friendly to America, were in a bit of a bind, and they had to find a compromise out of it. The publicity of this was so bad that this encouraged and indeed forced the Dutch central bank to request the return of its gold. Now, that was returned quite promptly, and we're talking about, from memory, something like 1,000 tons. The reason this is now becoming an issue in Germany is that you have the new AfD party, and one of the members is a chap called Peter Boehringer, who is one of the prime movers, if you like, behind getting the Bundesbank to run more responsible policies, to have control of its gold, and so on and so forth. I think the Bundesbank feels that it's in a bit of a cleft stick here, and its initial statement was, we have complete and utter confidence in our storage arrangements with the New York Fed. Really? You can see that the skepticism over the whole issue has already been created. The problem goes back to the early days when central banks were leasing gold into the market. The gold was being taken on by major funds, bullion banks and other funds, and used, if you like, as a means of a carry trade into US treasuries. You could borrow gold on lease at less than 1% or maybe about 1%, figure like that. And in the early 1980s, you could sell it into the market and then reinvest the proceeds into US T-bills, yielding you as much as 8 or 9%. Now, that yield differential dropped over time, but with the big bear market in gold, when from 1981, it went down from a high of, I think it was 850 on one morning fix, all the way down to around about 250 in 2002, you can see that there would have been, if you like, a feeling within the institutions, the bullion banks and all the rest of it, that to be short of gold was no problem. But of course, since then, things have changed. And I have no doubt now that there is diminishing confidence in the dollar as the reserve asset, that central banks around the world are beginning to think more, if you like, responsibly about the position of gold. And I think they're withdrawing from leasing. I think that in many cases, central banks will be repatriating their gold. So this is a trend which is broader than just Germany and Italy. And this is going to, I think, create liquidity problems in the gold bullion market. And that we're already beginning to see, because I've noticed in recent weeks that the strength in gold has really come from Western capital markets, not the Far East. Now, this is a very, very interesting development. And I think it does indicate that, if you like, as the Yorkshireman would say, there's trouble at mill. So you can see this is a story which I think is actually going to gather pace, probably in the next month or two.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it took 10 years, didn't it, last time, I think 2007 through to 2017, for Germany's haul to be repatriated. You'd think that this time around it would be really important that the gold is repatriated, no issues, a nice, smooth transition. Other than that, it could set off alarm bells, and who knows, the start of a massive repatriation program.
Indeed. I mean, there was, back in 2002, an analyst called Frank Veneroso, who did a lot of work on trying to establish the extent of the gold leasing problem. And by 2002, he concluded, now he hadn't got firm evidence of this, but he had sufficient circumstantial evidence to make it hard to argue against what Veneroso was saying. He concluded that between 1/3 and 1/2 of all central bank reserves around the world were out on lease. Wow. And as he put it in I think in a speech in Lima, and this is probably adorning the necks and wrists of Asian women. You know, how do you get it back? And I think this was, if you like, the origin of the problem. It was they were trying to suppress the gold price. They were trying to knock gold down and bring up the dollar, if you like, as the reserve currency. Because we became a fiat dollar-centric world. And it was very important for the Americans to ensure that the dollar's position was unchallenged by gold. So they did everything they could to ensure that people turned their back on gold and embraced the dollar. And that has actually led to problems we have today. Foreign ownership of dollars, and this is only, if you like, onshore dollars, amounts to a short $40 trillion. Now, when you bear in mind that US GDP is around about $30 trillion, you can see that it's overowned. And indeed, at the time of this recording, the dollar's trade weighting is going down, and the dollar is and gold is firming. So, how do we, if you like, resolve the problems from all the suppression activities in the past, from naked selling into the market, undeclared, I would add, and also leasing with a view to suppressing the price of gold, and funding the US Treasury's deficit. You know, this is all coming to a head, I think. So, yeah, I think that there's very, very good reason why both the Bundesbank and the Banca d'Italia are extremely worried about the position of their gold reserves. Well, they should be. It's more the politicians, perhaps, who are pushing this one at the moment.
Yeah, well, Peter Boehringer, I think that's the way you pronounce his name, said it's just no longer about trust. It's about control. If your reserves are abroad, you don't really own them. So, yeah.
The only thing I can say here is that trusting a combination of governments and financial institutions, I don't.